yeah, let's move to talking about the Northwest Division since it's been fun all season, kind of talking about what division has been the best division. Um,
Yes.
I feel like a lot
We
of
went
NBA
back and forth
fans,
for a bit, right?
yeah, NBA fans, I don't think typically think about divisions that much since it doesn't matter that often. It has tie-breaking implications sometimes, and I don't think it's a question now that the Northwest is the best division in basketball. Now that we've seen this first round and we've seen where these teams have ended up, specifically because of Nuggets, Wolves, and the Thunder, the top three teams who are all playing amazing right now. I'd say the Nuggets had the stiffer competition in the first round, so they are playing a little bit worse than those teams, at least just from looking at them in a vacuum.
They've also just been playing worse than the other two teams. They have
Yeah,
had stiffer competitions, but they've also just been playing worse. But yeah,
exactly.
top three teams in the conference. Two of them have swept in the first round. The other team closed out their series in five. What is it that you think makes Minnesota, Oklahoma City, and Denver? What separates them from the rest of the conference?
Each of these teams has a MVP level player, which is important. You got Jokic, Ant, and SGA. I think Ant he can get votes for MVP.
I
You
think
know,
he could get there. I don't think
yeah,
that he's quite MVP caliber yet, but certainly all NBA.
yeah, and I think
I had him second team all NBA.
he's playing arguably the best
Yeah, in the
in the playoffs
playoffs,
so
he's
far.
playing at an MVP level. Hmm.
So you need that number one who's just otherworldly, transcendent. And then you need really good fit pieces around them. And all of these teams have that. It is surprising that OKC is kind of in that mix because I don't even think they knew how these pieces would fit, but obviously they can play together in multiple
I think they
ways.
did.
Well, I don't know. Coming into the season, I don't think we knew just how much they would fit,
Yeah,
you
I think
know?
the fact that they shoot so well has made them really, really good. But in terms of that team, clearly from the beginning of the season, having a clearly identifiable play style at their core was it's just been the case all season.
Hmm.
And that's coaching, but also roster construction, right? Because they lean all the way into small ball. That's why Chet's the perfect five for them. The front office and the coach have a vision for how they want that team to play, similar to how I was talking about with the Knicks. And they leaned all the way into that from the roster down to how the offense is run and how the defense is run because there are specific things they have to do since they're playing small ball.
Yeah. I just think they have clear identities because just like even from a team level and on individual levels within the team. So it's like KCP and Lou Dort and Jaden McDaniels and those types of players are perimeter defending specialists who are really good at what they do. And then you have your offensive kind of force where Minnesota has Ant and Cat and Mike Conley, and OKC has tons of players that can do this, and Denver has tons of players that can score on any given possession. And they just have so many options where other teams just don't have that clear delineation or hierarchy on the offensive end, or their best offensive players on other teams in the West are also going to have to score most of the time. And it just doesn't seem viable right now, especially like when you look at the Suns and other teams like that, where so much overlap, not even really sure who the best defender is going to be in certain situations. Yeah, I just love how these teams are built. I think once the Nuggets won, people were saying, oh, every team's going to try and find like a big who can pass like Jokic. Everyone's going to copy them and try and find Jokic. And I think it's less of that and more like
No.
the idea of offensive workhorses with really good defenders around them. I mean, unless you
Yeah,
would
right.
say like
Because
a floor spacing big is really important in the NBA, which I mean, if you have it, that's great. Denver, Minnesota, OKC all have it, but do you think it's like a necessary thing that teams need?
I don't. I think it depends on your star. So like Jokic is a floor spacing big, but not really. That's not how the Nuggets
Yeah.
play most of the time. It's not central to their offensive
Hmm.
identity. In the case of, it's definitely not the case for Minnesota, and I still have my questions about them offensively, although they handled Phoenix pretty convincingly in that first round, even on the offensive end. OKC, for what OKC is trying to do, a floor spacing big is central to their play style. And I could say the same thing with, say, Indiana. Like, you want that in a small ball system. You see that in with Golden State. It's not like Draymond's never been a scoring sport floor spacer, but he could kind of attack more when he was younger than he's able to do now. And but because of his passing and his screening, he's able to not just stay on the floor, but he's kind of integral to the way that they play offense, right? So I think it's less about you need a floor spacing big and more you want all of the players on the floor to have a clearly defined role within
Mm-hmm.
the offense,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that's part of, while I have my questions about Minnesota, there's no doubt that they look a lot better this year than last because they've figured out some things that can help make the double big look with Cat and Rudy work. We talked in our last episode about some cool big to big passing moments, for example, and that takes advantage of Cat's playmaking ability. Um, and you do still have Mike Conley, who's now been able to spend a full season there, helping to organize everything on that team that I don't think has the best spacing, despite the fact that they're a good 3-point shooting team. But it's a little bit different when you have a situation where the question is whether other teams are respecting that spacing. And to have a floor general like Mike Conley, veteran point guard, assist to turnover king this season, snatch that chain from Chris Paul, being able to keep that team organized and be a high level decision maker there helps to make everything flow in what otherwise could be very chaotic, as we saw with how the Wolves looked last year when they were still trying to figure themselves out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think just having another season under their belt and just Ant being another year older and these players just maturing together and individually is really important, as you were saying. If we look at just Minnesota and the Thunder specifically, do you think that these teams were underestimated by any means? And obviously, they're performing very well right now. So,
Yeah, so obviously, yeah, like you said, they've been really dominant in round one of the playoffs. And I think they were underestimated, but I don't think I underestimated them. I think with OKC, like they handled the Pelicans in 4 games. I thought that that series would maybe go 5. I thought OKC could sweep them, but might drop a game just because the Pelicans, I don't know, have a hot shooting night or whatever, even without Zion. But they basically handled them, especially after game one, the way that I would expect OKC to, because they are a very high level execution team. They rarely have an undisciplined possession on either end of the floor, but particularly on offense. If anyone's isolating, it's just Shea or it's just J Dub. There's no like late shot clock,
mm-hmm.
Torian Prince step back threes,
Yeah,
um,
not as
because the
undisciplined
Lakers
as
couldn't
some
move the
other
ball
teams.
around. Right. But my concern with them is still size. They haven't run into a matchup where that could be an issue yet. So I think I rated them pretty fairly. And they've basically demonstrated that they're as good as uh, their regular season made them look. With Minnesota, I do think I underestimated their defensive flexibility a little bit. Um, I do think that Phoenix has issues, but I definitely didn't expect them to get swept by Minnesota, even if Minnesota managed to win that series. And I did pick Phoenix in that series just because of what I saw in that matchup in the regular season. It seemed like the Wolves just could not keep pace with the Suns, even when they were defending them well. I definitely underestimated Minnesota's maturity. I think that they've matured as a team a lot more since last season. You and I were talking about how last year Jaden McDaniels missed the playoffs because he punched a wall and broke his hand. I believe it was at halftime of the play-in game that they lost to the Lakers, if I recall correctly. And they just look a lot more serious. Cat has really settled into his role as more of the number 2 option on the team. And I think some of his decision making has gotten better, although, we'll talk about that when we get to our Nuggets Wolves series preview. But I think that that team makes a lot fewer of the sort of dumb, undisciplined plays that, say, bit them when they played us in round 1 last year, us being the Nuggets.
Hmm. I went through stages in a very typical way to most NBA fans where we knew the Thunder were going to be young but good. And I think a lot of people had questions about Minnesota and if Rudy and Cat were going to fit coming into this season. Then we
Yeah.
got a good sample size of seeing these teams, and they looked amazing, much to my dismay. And so then we're kind of reevaluating as we're going on. And I went through a lot of stages of, I feel like I accepted Minnesota was way more legit before I accepted the Thunder. Now, seeing them in the round 1, I think that they've pretty much done what I expected them to do. Like, I don't think I said that Minnesota, I mean, I picked Minnesota over the Suns, even though I thought it'd be way harder. I didn't know the Suns were going to be that bad. And I
Yes.
think the Thunder have a good chance to go to the Western Conference Finals. I don't know that I'm going to pick Clippers or Mavs over them, to be honest.
I think that the Mavs might have more trouble than I had originally anticipated, but I think the Clippers, if they make it past the Mavs, are going to get
Yeah,
smoked by
better.
the Thunder,
Oh, going to
frankly.
get smoked. Whoa. I thought
Yeah,
you were
I
going to
think they're
say
going to
they have
get
a better
smoked. I could
chance.
be wrong. Maybe this is me with my Ty Lue hate. But
Yeah. It is kind of cool. Like the
yeah,
Thunder, I think oftentimes coaching is taken for granted because the Steve Kerrs of the world or Joe Mazzulla's, where these teams are so talented, and you're thinking, well, the coach's job's so easy. But thinking about this Thunder
because they
team
have
where
the
they're
talent,
young,
right?
yeah, and obviously
The
the
players
Thunder are
get a lot of the credit.
talented, but like you said, with Denver and Jokic not needing to be a floor spacing big, even though he can shoot it from all 3 levels, it's just his volume and the 3 point line's not huge, and we're playing him more in the post. Whereas Chet is more floor spacey. It's like playing to your player's strength, and Dagnall is really good at doing that. I think for all these players and coming up with creative sets and putting them in spots on the floor in certain circumstances that they're going to be good, and that's really cool to see like that coaching really translate. So yeah,
I
I
think he
think
earned Coach of the Year. I really do. While there
yeah.
were lots of worthy candidates, it's so to me the thing that just, in addition to OKC having the record as such a young team, the reason they get there is because they are clearly so disciplined, and that is coaching. Like discipline comes down to coaching, right? Because as
Hmm.
talented as players are, being consistent and disciplined on both ends. Like they have maintained being a top 5 offense and a top 5 defense throughout the entire season. They never had real lulls in their play on either end of the floor. There was maybe a dip when they had some J-Dub and SGA missed some time with injuries toward the end of the season, but even then, like you watch that team play. Like I saw them go into Philly in Joel's first game back, and they almost won that game without J-Dub or SGA.
Hmm.
And they just keep playing the same way.
Let's just finish this segment up with your thoughts on the regular season and with these results. Is it changing how you look at it?
I don't think it changes how I look at it because I tend to think that the regular season matters to a point, and I still think that's true, even when you're looking at these incredibly good young teams. Like there are still certain things that they need to show me in the playoffs. Obviously, Denver is going to be a big test for Minnesota, but like vice versa, because everyone knows it's a really tough matchup for Denver. But the question is still about their late game offensive execution against like a good defense, like not Phoenix.
Hmm.
And with OKC in round 2 or round 3, no matter who they face, if they make it, even if they make it to the conference finals, they're going to be facing a huge team that is absolutely going to be able to take advantage of their size limitations, but they obviously have other things that they can do on the other end of the floor. It's clear that from the roster and the rotations that they play that they make a conscious trade-off of size for speed, skill, shooting, right?
Hmm.
And so it's gonna if OKC makes it to the conference finals, it's definitely gonna be a big styles make fights type thing because I think OKC is the best team in the league at what they do, and they'll probably be facing the best team in the league at what they do, whether they face Denver or Minnesota. I do think that they will still struggle a bit with, like, I think either Dallas or the Clippers will present size issues for them, unless Ty Lue decides he just wants to go small ball again with like Russell Westbrook at the 5 or whatever, and try to beat OKC at small ball, which is the thing that got them the 1 seed in the West. But for the most part, I think these teams showed us the things that they are best at in the regular season. Even though I think Denver kind of coasted for a lot of, I think that they actually showed they did too, because you see in this first round the way that the Nuggets approached it was pretty similar to some of these like slower games in the regular season where they're just not necessarily starting off slow or having these like really poor starts, but you see them really crank up the gear in these high leverage moments to end quarters, to end halves, obviously to close games, as opposed to going full gear for the entire game or close to it, which is a lot funnier to watch, but it seems to be the approach they're also taking at least through the first round of the playoffs. Whereas with Minnesota, you see their defense that was dominant in the regular season also be dominant through round one. With OKC, you see them have this clear identity that they've had all season, and they just execute, execute, execute. And if they're facing a team that lacks a clear identity, such as the New Orleans Pelicans, they're going to destroy them. Also, the Pelicans they're missing Zion too, so
Yeah.
the OKC should take care of them, and they did.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's just quickly touch on this idea of parity in the NBA and the regular season. Whereas last playoffs, we saw the Lakers, who were a 7 seed, make the Western Conference Finals, and we saw the Heat, which was an 8 seed, go all the way to the finals. And there was almost this idea where you can be a lower seed in the playoffs and take the regular season off and prioritize, your health and saving your best play till then if you have the LeBrons and the Jimmy Butlers of the world and all that. Whereas now we're seeing these teams in the top three really dominating, where historically that's what we see trending, whereas like you're a top 3 seed, you have a better chance of winning the championship. And I still think the regular season performance does translate to your postseason success if you're evaluating if you're going to win a championship or not, especially because I don't think it's parity in the sense that lower seeds have a chance. I think it's more parity in the variety of teams that are really good, mostly
Yeah, I
because of
think
the CBA, and we're moving away from the big three superstars joining up, and we're seeing more by volume complete rosters like the Wolves and the Nuggets and the Thunder and the
yeah.
Celtics and these teams.
And you have more teams where I think a lot of teams had their star, their franchise player before, but you have a lot of teams now where like the second or third guy is an all-star or all-star caliber too. So
Hmm.
there's just less margin, I think, between what teams can do. So you end up in a situation where, like you're saying, the middle tier of the NBA, there are just a lot more teams in that middle tier where you could say they're a good playoff team. I will say that a team like the Lakers that ended up in the play-in because of one bad stretch in January, and we talked about how some of these older teams were being pushed because of the consistency of some of the really good young teams throughout the season. So the older teams couldn't coast anymore and still make the playoffs. I'm not sure that I'm ready to say that that the Lakers were a bad team. They're just
Oh
an
no.
inconsistent team.
Yeah.
And we saw that even in round one because, like we said, the Nuggets did not play their best basketball, but they were still able to go 3-up on the Lakers, not playing well, not shooting well at all, and then eventually close it out in five because they would take advantage of these bad basketball stretches from the Lakers. But it's not like they were a bad team. Everyone likes to talk about how the Lakers led for, like, I don't know, 70% of the series or something in
Yeah.
terms of the total minutes. I do think if they were playing another middle tier team that they're pretty good, especially because they have LeBron James playing at the level that he was throughout these games. Like, he was incredible on both ends in this game 5. I really was not sure that the Nuggets would actually close that
Oh
out.
yeah.
Um,
Scary.
and when you have a LeBron smelling blood in the water, that's just like that's like worth another point in your point differential when you're looking at playoff performance of your team.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. I
but yeah, the
really.
regular season does matter because it reveals the certain habits of teams,
Right.
even like both the good and the bad.
For sure.
So
I really feel like the Lakers did the best that they could. Like I would be hard for me as a Lakers player to look at the series besides like, D'Lo having 0 points or something like that to be like, oh, like we really let this slip through our hands. Like we had it. I really feel like they maximized Reeves and such and tried the best coverages and matchups that they could. And I think AD and LeBron pretty much played the best that they could. And I think that they're underrated a bit because I know people like to clown them. And I do think the Nuggets played not up to their standard, but I do think the Lakers did make some things difficult.
thank you all for joining us on What's in a Game. Definitely look out for our Nuggets Wolves series preview on Friday. We'll also be recapping a couple of the other round one series that are still going on, so don't worry about that. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, leave us a review on Spotify or Amazon Music. Tell your mom, tell your dad, tell your brothers, your sisters, your friends. We're trying to grow this thing. And just remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.